with University of Lynchburg, and as Menina was saying, I oversee all of the enrollment and admissions and financial aid and those kinds of things. So I'm hoping I could be really helpful to you today as you're thinking about colleges and thinking about how to impress colleges in the United States. I'm going to pull up a presentation and share a little bit with you from that. But I just wanted to say, I think a couple of quick notes. It's great. It looks like everybody has their audio on mute right now, which is great, which is really important. And I can certainly take questions a little bit later. But feel free, if you do want to turn on your camera, you are welcome to. You don't have to, but it is always fun for me to see faces of folks that I'm talking with. So feel free to do so if you'd like. Thank you very much. That's you over there. That's great. All right, I'm going to pop up my presentation and we will get ready to go here. All right, so I've called this presentation a 30-minute introduction to making a good impression on colleges and universities in the United States. And I'm excited to share it with you because, again, I think it is a succinct, kind of condensed way to think about how to put your, we say, best foot forward, right? How to make the best possible impression as you are going out and applying and helping colleges and universities to get to know you and what you could bring to their university. So let me, there we go. Let's go in here. So a little bit about me. Again, I'm Vice President for Enrollment. I've worked, this is my 26th year working in U.S. higher education. So I've worked in college admissions offices, career offices. I've worked with financial aid. So a lot of different areas of U.S. higher education. I have met with thousands of students. I have interviewed with thousands of students and read many, many applications. So I'm hoping that that experience will be really useful to you as we go forward, and I can answer questions for you and just help you with whatever you might need. I work for the University of Lynchburg. The University of Lynchburg is a well, I'll show you a little bit actually about what we have to offer. So we are a small to medium-sized university of 2,500 students. We offer 53 undergraduate programs and 17 graduate programs. We are famous for a couple of things. We're famous for helping our students get experiential learning in what they do. So we want you to learn not only by listening and taking notes, but also to learn by doing. So we offer students very practical applications of what it is that they're learning. So we try to give them lots of experience through internships, through the work that they do in the classroom. We want them to really understand and know how to do what it is they're learning about. And then the other thing I think we're kind of famous for is, I don't know if you all use the phrase pay it forward, but for us, it's really important that our students, our graduates, learn to give back to others, that they do something good for their community, that they help others in their neighborhood or associations or organizations that they belong to. We want to invest in students so that they can invest in other people moving forward. So we have some great graduate pathways where students come in and they start with us as an undergraduate and they move right into a graduate program. And we do have, I think, very strong scholarship opportunities for international students. The location where we are in Central Virginia. We've been considered a top 25 college cities place. Again, a real commitment to serving others. And we are about 3 hours south of Washington, D.C., right on the main train line with beautiful mountains in the background. So that's just a little bit about who we are and where I'm coming from today. So let's look at the different areas that we're going to talk a bit about today and how you can make the best possible impression as you apply to different colleges and universities. So we're going to start with helping your application to make sense and kind of telling a story with your application that others can understand well. We're going to talk a little bit about crafting your essay and what would make good essay topics and how to approach an essay. We're going to talk a little bit about finding recommendations and who can help you kind of support your application in the process. And then finally, we're going to talk a little bit about interacting with the admissions office and how to make those exchanges, how to communicate well, those kinds of things. So let's jump right in. All right, so how do we help your application to make sense? And I talk about this as really being about creating a story for you. So as you could imagine, people who are in admissions roles, They read many applications. And I think oftentimes students think, wow, I have to really labor over my application. I have to make everything just perfect. I have to really, put everything in there because, I need to, the person reading this needs to really kind of look at it and go over it. But typically what happens is admissions offices don't spend a long time on each application. They look at it for maybe a couple of minutes. They kind of check and see what the highlights are. They try to get a sense of who the student is and what the student can bring to the community. So knowing that changes a little bit about how you might approach your application. I think one of the first things to realize is that readers of applications, they want to like you. Right? They want to find exciting students. They want to find students that they want on their campus. They're, for the most part, not trying to like weed you out. They're trying to say, wow, okay, is this a student who I could get really excited about, right? And they're hoping that they will see something and say, oh, wow, this is a really interesting student with an interesting story, and then go and share with others that are, in the office, what it really, that they found this really interesting and exciting student. So they want to like you, and your job is just to help them like you in the process. So years ago, we used to talk a lot about finding students who were well-rounded, so that they had like a little bit of everything. And I think that has changed over the past maybe decade or so, where now we are looking for students who bring particular interesting things to our campus, right? So we think of it more like we will have a well-rounded group of students that comes in, but that group will be made up of students with different, like I think about angles. So if you all know like what a triangle is, right, with 3 points, I think of students oftentimes as a triangle. And I think this is a good way to think about yourself and help the person remember who you are by knowing what your angles are, right? So this is, for example, I might read a student and say, oh, okay, this is a student from Kazakhstan and they're interested in the arts because they did some kind of really special art project in their community. And they're also really interested in, I don't know, basketball, something like that, right? So you see how there are these different points, right? That it's easy for me to remember like 3 things about a particular student. So it's things that might stand out either academically about them in terms of their activities, their social opportunities, or their service, things like that, that are easy to remember. And you want to help your reader see what those things are. So you want to know going into your application, what are the 3, maybe 4 things I'm going to point my reader to so that they can remember me more easily. I think we want applications that are consistent. So we look at applications and we say, okay, if this student wants to be a writer, how are their grades in their writing subjects, right? Or if the student wants to go into, something in math, how are their grades in math? Have they been active in clubs or activities that relate to those particular areas? So I think, we're looking for that consistent story. Does the student make sense? Can we understand kind of where the student is coming from? And then I would say sort of be enthusiastic, but don't gush. So this is sort of a balance, right? So you want to be able to say, like in your personal statement, that you're excited about potentially attending the university in the United States, that you're interested in a particular major or area that you're thinking about, that there might be something about that particular college or university that you've read about that sounds exciting or you think you're a good match for. At the same time, you don't need to go way over the top and say, oh, this is the best thing ever. You're the best school ever. I've waited my whole life for this, that kind of thing. You can kind of tone it down a little bit, but just focus on like, hey, I've done a little bit of research. I think I could be a great match for you. And I think you could be a great match for me. And I'm excited about this opportunity. So I think if you keep those points in mind, that will help you understand kind of how your reader is approaching you. They're trying to figure out what are those couple of things that stand out to you, and does your story make sense as they get to know you through your application? So next, let's talk about crafting your essay. I think a lot of students are very kind of intimidated by doing an essay. Again, I think the important thing to remember is it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be some amazing, novel that's the best thing that anybody has ever read, right? We're really just looking to learn a little bit more about you, right? So I think a couple things are important. Number one is certainly picking a good topic. So usually what happens is students tend to write about the same topics over and over again. For a while, it was very common in the United States for people to write about their sports programs and how well they did in their sports programs. Or they would write about the person who has the most influence on my life, and they would usually talk about a parent and how they had influenced them. Or they would talk about, a particular hardship that they had gone through. Those are all okay topics. They just are more common, more utilized. And so sometimes it's to your advantage to pick a topic that is a little bit different than maybe other people would pick. So you could certainly pick about an issue that is, worldwide that people have concerns about. You could pick, one of the things I love as a topic is to talk about something that's local to you. So what's going on in your community that matters to you? Have you gotten involved in something where you help others in your community, or you see a problem in your community that you're working on? I think that can be a really, really nice topic. But the other things that are perfectly acceptable to write about are just
Recording in progress.
Giving people a chance to get to know you and to teach them something about you, right? So I think that's really what the essay is all about. Certainly they're going to look and say, okay, can you communicate well in the English language? But we know that there are ways around this that people find. So it's really just getting a sense of, can you communicate? What is your voice? How do you sound? How do you think? But it's more about you teaching us something about you, right? And then us also seeing how that student will fit and what interesting things that they will bring. So use your unique view. It's perfectly acceptable and encouraged for you to kind of write things from your perspective. Your opinion on things is fine. Sometimes there are some high political issues that you might want to avoid, but a lot of times just telling us about yourself and why you are interested in this kind of an education, what you think you will bring, or what you're interested in doing in the world once you graduate. Those are all, really great topics. And again, speak in your voice, teach your writers something about you that they will remember. Maybe something you love to do, maybe something you've experienced in your life, but something that it's easy for them to remember who you are. Okay, let's talk a little bit about recommendations. So institutions are different when it comes to recommendations. Some require a certain number. Some allow you to send as many or as few as you'd like. Some don't even require recommendations. So that may differ by institution. And you have to kind of look at each one and say, okay, what is their requirement? But I think knowing who to pick is important, and knowing what they can say. Obviously, we're expecting that you're going to have people who write well about you, or you wouldn't ask them for a recommendation, right? You would ask someone else. But I think one thing that students sometimes do is they just try to find the most influential person that they can. They try to find, maybe their principal or somebody, in the community that is, important, that kind of thing. So the interesting thing about that is we probably won't know that person, right? So they may be well known in your circle, but they might not be known in our circle. So it's actually, I think, more important to find someone who you feel like really knows you than it is to find someone who has more influence. Because what we're looking for is someone to say, I've observed this student. I know this student has a strong work ethic. I know that they can be successful at the college or university level. I've seen maybe this student, have challenges and overcome them. So it's important that the person be able to actually talk about you and how they know you, more than it is that that person be someone who is, really famous or, important. That kind of thing is not necessary. What do you want them to write about? Well, again, we know they're probably going to write positive things about you, right? Hopefully, or you wouldn't have asked them to be your recommendation. But we also are really looking for a sense of why they think you could be successful, why they think you could be a good sort of ambassador across cultures, why they think you could handle, studying in a new environment with new challenges, and how they think you would do in the classroom, and maybe your previous studies, that kind of thing. I often will suggest giving your recommender a resume. So if you have an activity sheet or something that shows what you've been involved in your highlights, you can share that information with your recommender, and that'll make it a lot easier for that person to be able to, say great things about you that are accurate. And again, what we're hoping for, if you remember your reader, is we want your story to match. So hopefully your recommenders know you well enough to say things about you that match with the rest of your story. So again, if you're going to be a mathematician, your recommender hopefully will say something about that you have good math abilities, right? Or if you want to be a musician, hopefully your recommender will say something about the fact that you've been very dedicated to music and that you have talents in that area. So again, you're trying to make that story all fit together and make sense for people. All right, working with admissions. This can be a real unknown, I think, for students, right? They're not sure who is on the other side of the admissions process, and is that person friendly? How do I communicate with them? How do I get answers to the questions that I have? That can be a real challenge. So let's look at some suggestions on this. So I broke this really into two pieces. One is more about general communication, and the other is about interviewing. So when I would say about general communication, this is asking questions about the application process or what it's like to be at the institution. This is sending information about your application or anything that's needed for them to make a decision on your application. So I would say in this, what you want to do is demonstrate interest, but not overwhelm the person, right? So what you're trying to do is maybe send the idea that you are very interested. You've hopefully done your homework a little bit on the institution. You like what you've seen. You feel like it's potentially a good fit for you. You're thoughtful in what you're trying to do and where you're going. But at the same time, you're not sending people something all the time, right? So I've had students who they are very big communicators and they communicate with you constantly. And you want to kind of save it up a little bit. Certainly check in once in a while is totally fine, but you don't want them to be hearing from you like every day or every other day. That will definitely tire people. So email is usually the preferred method of communication. Some areas will use things, they'll maybe use WhatsApp. They might use a video call like this. So there are other opportunities as well, but in most cases, email is the best way to go. And I would say, don't expect an immediate response. Hopefully places will be timely, but they are working with a lot of students typically. So if they don't get back to you in the same day, that doesn't mean they're not interested. That doesn't mean they're, poor service. That just means that they're very busy, especially certain times of year, and trying to get information to all students. So you have to kind of have a little bit of patience with that, but they should get back to you. If they don't eventually, that does tell you something about maybe their interest level. So I also wanted to say a little bit about interviews. Interviews are something, again, that every institution is different with. Some don't offer them at all. Some require them. Some offer them as a possibility, but not required. So every place is a little different, and you can check and see what each institution, what their preference is, how they, prefer to do with interviews, whether that's something they use or not. If you do have a chance to interview, I would take it. I think in most cases, the interview helps you as long as you are able to be friendly and communicate relatively well. Usually an interview works in your favor. If you're really, really concerned about maybe like language ability or that kind of thing, you might hesitate and maybe, practice first. But as long as you feel comfortable in that area, usually the interview is going to help you. Within an interview, you want to be yourself. Interviews are not as formal as they used to be. They used to be very formal, but now they tend to be much more like just conversations where the institution wants to learn about you and you want to learn about them. And so you both have questions and you want to just chat. And again, just try to look and see if it's a good match for you. So be yourself. A little bit of humor is okay. You definitely want to smile. You can laugh a little bit as part of the interview. Remember that colleges and universities want to like you. They want to be excited about your application. They want to come off the interview saying, wow, I just met with this great student. They were energetic and enthusiastic, and they had done, really interesting things. So they want to like you. So again, your job is just to help them continue to like you. And I would say, finally, make it more of a conversation. It doesn't have to be a very formal feeling interview. You can ask questions back. Again, the more time you spend just chatting and talking about small things in life, that's all great, because it makes a connection between you and the interviewer. I did want to throw in a special note on cost. Obviously, this is a big factor in many families' decisions about moving forward. Different areas have very different kind of cultural norms when it comes to asking for support and asking for funding. Certainly, ask, inquire, try to research as much as you can before you ask about what the university's policies are. Some universities have no international scholarship funding. Others have good international scholarship funding. It's very few places now that do full scholarships. A few do, but most do not. Most have partial funding for students if they offer scholarships. You want to look at those. I think one thing to be careful of is just to, if you're going to ask about it, just always ask kind of respectfully, delicately. I think to, just let people know that you're really interested in the university, and maybe instead of, can you give me more money? You say, I'm really interested in coming. Is there anything else that I can do on my side to make it more possible, to receive additional support? I want to make sure I do everything that I can. I really would like to attend. I'm trying to do things on my side to make this as possible, as doable as possible. Are there any other things that I can be doing that might help make that possible? I think that's often a good approach. All right, so my last big slide here before we get into some questions. Again, I think really important to remember that colleges and universities want to like you as a candidate, right? So start with the assumption that, okay, I'm going in there, they're set up to like me. They want to find exciting students, right? They are looking to bring people to campus that will add something to their campus. And you, as an international student, first of all, are going to add a different perspective. You're coming from an area where we don't see a lot of students typically. And so that's a new perspective. You might have a really interesting story to be able to share, or some talent that you can contribute. Those are all things that colleges and universities are going to be excited about. And so knowing that you're going in with something to offer, and the fact that they want to like you, and your job is to just kind of have that, sort of fun feeling about who you are, that positive energy, and, allow them to continue to like you and to push your application forward. And then again, you're going to use the different pieces of your application and whatever interactions you have to make an impression. So these are the most important elements as we looked at the application itself, the essay, the recommendations, potential interviews or communication. It's all going to work together and come together to tell a story about who you are. And what you want to do is continue to remind the places that you apply what's interesting about you, what is different, what can you bring that's maybe a little bit unusual, that you're passionate about, that makes you memorable to that person, that helps you stand out in that way. So if you can use all these different pieces together, that will help you to tell a story that makes sense, that is easy to remember, and that helps you to stand out in the reader's mind and want to move your application forward. All right, so that is my last slide. Let me unshare here, and then I would love to take questions. You can stick them in the chat, or you can, unmute and ask a question if you'd like. Let's see, I've got my first one here. Okay, could you elaborate on the role of EFC in the application? So I'm assuming you're meaning on the financial side, the expected family contribution. If that's not correct, let me know if there's a different topic. So that would be on the financial side. So some institutions use finances up front as a way to decide who they will admit and who they won't, and others do not. So it really depends on the way that they do their process. So typically you can tell that by if they ask for your financial documentation up front, it means that that probably is going to be part of the process and part of the consideration. If they don't, if they ask for just your academic information up front, then they probably, then they won't use that as part of the decision. It'll just be for later that they'll ask you to provide that information. So some institutions will look at that, and that will be a deciding factor in limiting their application pool. And others will say, we'll admit you if you're qualified, and then it's up to you whether you can find the financing to do that. So, I would say sometimes that EFC can be a limiting factor in the beginning. So again, it may make you want to look at places that don't require that upfront as much. Let's see. How important are honors? Could I get in without any national, international ones? Yes. So the interesting thing about U.S. higher education is there's a really wide range in terms of what's available, and to the point where I think there's really probably something for almost everyone. So some institutions will, in order to be competitive there, you will need honors, AP courses, international baccalaureate, something, recognized nationally or internationally, that kind of thing. Those are, typically your most competitive institutions, but there are many very good institutions who don't require those particular kind of things, or if you have them, that's wonderful. I do know, almost all admissions offices love to see something where you've been one of just a few people who have done something. Again, it doesn't have to be internationally famous or nationally famous, but if you've done something even in your local area and you've won a particular, I don't know, a spelling bee, right? Or a UN competition, or, something, a speech writing or anything that you stood out as having something sort of distinctive, that can be very helpful. And that may be one of the things that you want to point that admissions office to and say, this is something that's really important to me. And, I want to make sure that you're able to see that. So I would say put anything like that kind of towards the front so that we can see it really well and it stands out. But if you don't have something like that, it doesn't mean that you can't be admitted to a good institution. All right, now the questions are really coming in. Okay, let's see. Can you explain the role of optional offerings in college application? Optional essays, optional, okay, yeah, optional scientific papers or materials. Sure. So I think we have some basic minimum things that we feel like we need to see, but we also know that students have some things that they want to share with us that can help make them stand out. So if you have the option to do that, you are welcome to. That's telling you that those won't be considered to the same level as the basic, kind of most important pieces of your academic experience, but that we will note them and take a look at them. So yes, if you have, published something or been involved in research or that kind of thing, put that forward. Again, I would tie it into your story and talk about how that shapes who you are or what your interests are. Again, it's not required. You don't have to do this. That's why they're optional. But if you do have something you'd like to put forward, we will definitely read that, and that can be helpful. Let's see. I know that ED is restrictive, meaning that students must go to that university. Are there any exceptions? I want to make sure I understand your question well. So I'm thinking you're asking about making sure that that you need to go to the university where you get your I-20 from, which is true. When you are allowed to transfer in the future, that can be done. It can be a little bit messy. I think, I will let you know that institutions are admitting you and enrolling you, expecting that you will want to stay with them. They're not thinking, oh, well, okay, they'll come for a year and then they'll go somewhere else. So they're pretty disappointed if you do that, honestly. They're really hoping that you will find a good fit and make this a good place. And I think, what's interesting is that I think in the US, it's a little different in terms of the we would say like the pecking order of institutions. The US culture is a little different in that you can get very, very good outcomes from institutions, whether they are famous institutions or not. In fact, sometimes you do better at a little bit less famous institution because you get better attention, you get better connections, you can become kind of a star at that smaller institution that actually will help lead you to better connections as you move forward, because so much of your sort of future and job opportunities are about those connections. So I hope that will help. How important are AP score exams? Again, APs are just one of many things that you can use to kind of indicate your academic level. Other students use dual college credits. Other students are in IB programs. Other students are in a place that don't offer AP or even honors courses. And so it's more important that you show that you've had consistent strength in your curriculum. I think you can talk about that again, sort of in that, that essay or other pieces. So certainly they help, but they're not required. How long can it take to write a good quality essay? And that sort of depends on, I guess, how fast of a writer you are, how much time you want to put into it. Typically, if you're being asked for a personal statement, that's a lot shorter. That might only be maybe 500 words, where if you're asked for an essay on something, you're talking maybe more in the 1,000-word range. So, you want to spend, a portion of a couple days crafting an essay. I think, the most important is, make sure that you have it proofread, that you get a chance for somebody else to look over it and find, corrections that need to be made. Make sure you address it to the right college or university. We often see that students will send something and they'll put the wrong college's name in the essay. And you don't want to do that. But have it read over, get a couple of different opinions about, how to make it strong, but keep your voice. So I think that, the length is usually less important than it is that you get your point across. But you do want to take some time and maybe write it first and then think a little bit about it and then, kind of give it a rewrite and make sure that it makes sense and it's as clear as it can be. I would like to know if your school status matters to university. What if I come from a simple, small public school? This is a great question. I think it can work for you or against you, just depending on how you utilize that, right? So if you're coming from a, prestigious school that's well known, those institutions will probably worry less about your preparation, about your, English ability, those kinds of things. Those could work for you. So I think if you come from a less known place, what you want to do is talk about what a great opportunity this is, and that you bring something different because of that, right? Just to say, hey, my whole area is counting on me to do great, right? Or to go and get a better type of education. Like, I'm going to be the first person in my area to go to the United States and get a university education from there. And I'm so excited, and everybody's behind me, and my family is excited, right? We are determined to make this work. So I think what you want to do is maybe reassure people that that's an exciting thing, that's an advantage, that they have the opportunity to do something really good by welcoming you to the university, right? I mean, everybody, I think, wants to help people who want that kind of help, who are willing to work hard. And so you want to work that into your story, I think, and talk about how they are really, able to do a good thing by helping you to get that opportunity. Let's see. I've heard that sensitive essay topics such as domestic violence, mental illness are a red flag for universities. What is your opinion on this? These can be very difficult. I would probably avoid them. That's up to you. I'm not saying, no place will, appreciate that. I think a couple things make that difficult. Number one, it's a difficult topic to write about, especially across cultures, because you don't know how something that you're sharing might be perceived across the culture. The other thing is that, so we are in some ways kind of, expected to share if there is a significant mental health concern or violence concern or those kinds of things, right? So we're used to doing that because in the United States we would have to probably share that with someone and say, this is a student who we are very concerned about, right? And that would make it difficult for us to maybe work with that student. So So while we certainly want to know, what you're bringing to the university and challenges that you think you might face, that can be a very challenging topic to write about well. So if it was me, I would probably not choose that topic. But students, I've seen it done, and I've seen it done well and written about really well. So I wouldn't say definitely don't do it, but you just have to be very careful. And again, I think if I did choose that topic, I would have a couple of adults read it and make sure that they think that it comes across the way that you want it to. Let's see. What is the best way to answer this question? What kind of student specific what's the best way to answer this question? What kind of student specific university are you looking for? So I think what you're asking really is, how do you know what a university is interested in, and how do you write to that, right? Or guess, or how do you apply to that? You might look at most universities will have like a mission statement or some kind of purpose statement about the university. And so, they talk about their values. So for example, at the very beginning, I told you that we have values that are focused on helping students to get practical experience in what they're doing, to learn by doing. And I also told you that one of our values was to invest in students so that they can invest in others and to give back and do service and things like that. So for example, those would be great things, right? You could read about those, about my university, and you could say, wow, okay, I relate to those things. I think I could be a good match for those. And so you could write and say, I sense from what I read about you that your institution really values these things. I also value those things. Those are, a great match for me. I think this would be a place that I would be a good match because of that. So I would look for their value statements, their purpose statements or mission statements, and try to, kind of focus on those pieces. So. Let's see. Can you please send the presentation after the meeting? I can share that with the Education USA office and see the best way for them to distribute it to everybody. So I'm glad it was helpful. I wanted to ask if we provide some documents from the hospital which shows that one of our family members is sick. Also, if I will provide that my sister is studying in an expensive school, will that help to get a scholarship? It's hard to say. Every school is different. And so I don't think it would hurt to do that. I think particularly, to share that your family has particular, medical bills, things that, are maybe unexpected or difficult. That it just depends on the policy of each place. Some have scholarships that are very fixed and like, this is what they offer, and they try to give you the best possible option right up front. And others have a little more leeway in doing that. You could always ask, right? You could always say, I applied for scholarships. I'm really excited. Would it be helpful? I have a couple of unusual circumstances in my family situation that, would it be helpful if I shared those with you? They probably will be more open to the family sickness issue than they will about the expensive other school, just because they will usually think, okay, well, the sibling had a choice to go to the other school, right? So maybe that's not the case, but in most cases, they'll kind of assume that you made choices family-wise, but they'll look at your perhaps illness and say, wait a minute, the family did not have a choice about that. All right, let's see. Uniqueness is the most important feature in applications. How can I distinguish myself through an essay in the submission process? Is it possible to experiment with the plot or with the structure? Yes, you can get very creative in an essay if you want to. It used to be that a lot of colleges and universities would, really push students to be creative, and they would ask them some strange question like, what flavor of ice cream, would you be if you were an ice cream flavor, or, something like that. I don't see that as much anymore. But you are welcome to get creative. I have seen students write poetry. I've seen them write plays. I have seen them do conversations. So, you could certainly do that, and it might stand out as something, a little different. I think maybe it's not one big thing, right? I think students sometimes feel like, oh, I have to have this one thing I've done that like sets me apart from the rest of the world. If you have that, well, that's wonderful. But again, I think what you may also want to think about is doing that sort of triangulation, right? And so what's unique is that probably nobody else has that same combination of things that you do, right? Where, you are a student interested in physics who also does music, who also, volunteers at their local, I don't know, homeless shelter or food pantry, right? I mean, that's a really unique combination, right? And so you may have a combination of things that may make you really unusual. But yes, you are welcome to experiment with the structure, the plot line of your essay. You can really write whatever you would like in many cases, unless the university tells you have to follow a certain pattern. Okay, I plan on majoring in economics, and I barely passed AP macroeconomics. Should I submit them, the APs? Good question. I mean, I probably would. I don't know. I think it's really up to you, right? I mean, I think if you can tell a compelling story about why you want to be in economics, and maybe that you just didn't have experience with that, that could be fine. If you don't want to submit them, just leave them out, and just if your grades are good in those areas, that might help you more. Boy, it's a tough question. I think you just want to put together as satisfying a application as you can, and if you feel like those are going to hurt you, then you don't have to include them. Are there any red flag topics for an essay? Well, I would go back to the question that was asked earlier. I think it is very difficult to write about, again, sort of mental health, domestic abuse, those kinds of really difficult topics. Again, they may elicit some sympathy for you as a student, but they may also say, wow, I don't think this student has the support or will have the support here that they will need. I don't think we can serve the student as well as we would like to. So I would, probably try to stay away from those topics. You just have to be careful. Even some things like a lot of death in the family or those kinds of things can just be really difficult to talk about. So if you have sort of just this one shot at doing that, I wouldn't probably use it on those kinds of topics. How to choose a college for education. That's a whole big topic in itself that maybe we'll have to do that one as a separate presentation. But there are many ways to do that. Again, I would look a lot at the the values of each place and figure out, okay, do those values line up with mine? What can I learn about it? How do they treat me when I reach out and communicate? Do I get a good warm welcome? Is it a place that's interested in me, interested in international students? There are a lot of big questions in there. So I would definitely work with your Education USA advisor, and they can make some great suggestions, I think, about how to kind of look through all the institutions and check it out. You can certainly apply here and take a look here and see if this is potentially a match for you as well. When you get an application without an SAT, does it alarm you? Does it make the application weaker? If yes, how much weaker? I think what's interesting is we've gone, so many institutions have gone completely test optional that it's not alarming the way it used to be, right? We used to kind of worry, okay, well, the only reason a student wouldn't send their SATs is that, their scores weren't good, right? And I think now we have a lot of students who just don't want to take the test, just don't feel like it reflects them well. And we don't look at it as in the same way. I think we more look at it and say, look, if you have a great score, send it to us, because that'll help in your consideration. If you don't, and you think your other academic pieces are a better reflection of who you are, then that's totally fine too. So I think there are some schools, obviously the more competitive you go, the more they're going to want to see that probably. So it can help you if you have good ones, but there are many schools that really won't even look twice. They'll just look and say, oh, okay, what do we know about the student? But that's, in those cases, I think it's more important even to tell your story and your interest to give you a little bit more sense of depth. All right, let's see. Oops. Doesn't want to go down. Now let me try here. Okay. Acceptance rate for graduate schools, I would say those vary wildly between where you want to go and even program to program. So unlike undergraduate, those acceptance rates, each program is very, very different and very specific. What about students having many interests during high school? Example, in chemistry club. My major is computer science. I also had some extracurriculars. Is it inconsistent? No, I think what you can do in that case is really talk about how you are a student who is very much exploring, and talk about, again, so much of this is about how you put your story together, right? So if you've been a consistent student, you can say, I've always been interested in this. You can see how all my activities line up with that. If you've been a student who's done more exploration, you can say, I'm really interested in a lot of things, and I'm really trying to figure out how to bring those pieces together in my education, right? The US higher education system is actually fairly flexible and allows you to, really in some ways shape your education more than some other places. So it's really okay to say, I experimented a little bit in this, and then I wanted to learn about this. So I went here and learned a little bit more about this, and then this, right? I think what you want to do is frame it, right? So it's not like, well, I tried this, but I lost interest after a while, and then I went to something else. No, you want to say, I intentionally chose this piece, and when I learned everything that I could, I felt like I actually wanted to learn more about this. So I'm kind of on this journey to figure out, who I want to be and how I can make the biggest contribution. So again, it's sort of all in the story and the way you tell it. What are the main qualities admissions appreciates in students? I would say positivity. I would say enthusiasm, work ethic, wanting to take full advantage of the opportunities that you're here. Let's see. What are major factors that can be included in the Why Us essay? That's a good question. Again, I would look back at those areas about the institution's value statements. You could always look and say, geographically, this is of interest to me, right? For example, for us, hey, I wanted to be in a small city, but I still wanted to have access to, bigger cities like Washington, D.C. And I see you guys are on the train line. And, that's really advantageous to me because I want to focus on my studies, but still be able to visit places. So you can use geography. You can say, you have what looks like a really strong program in, business and entrepreneurship. And, I saw that, in our case, you have a stock portfolio that students run, and that's really great, right? So if you get a chance to connect with a faculty member, maybe, or somebody to learn more about the program and be able to share like what you've learned. You can look up specific faculty members and say, I saw this faculty member, does research in this area, which I thought was really interesting. And I think I'd, really like to learn and study more with that faculty member. You can say, I saw that the university has a commitment to these kind of values, or, that you seem to value this in your students, or you say you want this in students. And I feel like that's the kind of student I am. So I think what you really want is to listen to what the university is saying about itself, and then sort of repeat that back, showing them why you are what they are looking for. Is it possible to get a bachelor's in the US if I already have a bachelor's, or am I currently studying to get the bachelor's degree? You can get what's called a second bachelor's. In the United States, you would probably have to have your first bachelor's translated by an evaluation service, so that they know where you're at, to figure out which credits you could use and which ones you couldn't. But you are allowed to do that if you want to get a second bachelor's, and it probably wouldn't take you the whole time, just depending on how much of your initial degree could potentially transfer in as other credits. Question about how athletic activities during school studies contribute to my application. Sure. Again, I think this is, one of those pieces that you can add in, and you can say, this is something that's really important to me. I do spend a lot of time, I'm a swimmer, and I spend a lot of time practicing. So I maybe don't do as many other activities because I'm really committed to this. So I think, schools look favorably on students with academic or athletic activities. Shows that you're busy, that you're involved, and those kinds of things. And it also, you can certainly talk about how it helps you to balance your time and manage your time well, so that you can still have great studies, but also, are able to do both. All right. Okay. I don't have AP or IB at my school. Is SAT highly recommended to take? It could be helpful because it could give like an an objective evaluation of that, would give some context for your school. Again, if it's not required, it isn't technically necessary, but it could be useful for you. It can also help if you have high scores on your English exams, right? So if you do Duolingo or TOEFL or those kinds of things, having a great score on that can also, make a big difference. It probably doesn't hurt to take them, and then you can decide whether you want to send them or not. But having that extra piece of information, if you score well, could certainly help you for sure, especially in more competitive places. Is it a good idea to apply to an extremely selective college for early decision, a dream college? Can it hurt your chances of getting admitted because of very competitive pool or legacy athletics? Thanks in advance. Great question. Usually early decision is usually your largest chance of being admitted. Usually those pools are a little more limited, and schools really like to admit students from there because they want to know that students are committed to coming there. So usually it's not going to hurt your chances of admission. It usually will help them. But again, you do have to know that you are committed to doing that. And sometimes you'll know the finances before and sometimes you won't. So, you need to be able to be ready to work with that. But it shouldn't hurt your chances. Usually the pool is actually less competitive than the larger regular pool. All right. Am I down to the end of the questions, or am I just stuck here on the side? All right. I think that might be the end of the questions. Any last questions here before we kind of wrap things up today? Well, I hope this has been helpful to you, that it's given you a better sense. Again, I hope you get the sense that this is so much about crafting your story and presenting yourself well, and, bringing all the pieces together. Oh, I do have a question. It looks like Fatima.
I think she's just clapping.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll take that. That sounds great. Thank you. I'll take clapping. Again, thank you for joining us. As I mentioned, please feel free to check out the University of Lynchburg. If we can get you more information, we'd be happy to do that. We love having international students. We have a good group coming in this fall, and very excited to have that diversity in our population. So I hope this has been helpful, and I wish you great luck as you are applying to institutions. I hope you have great success and a good experience. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Aaron. I hope you will receive this year more applications from Kazakhstan, especially from talented students. Yeah, I think this presentation was so informative, especially Q&A section. Yeah.
Great.
I hope
I'm really
we'll
glad.
see you again very soon.
That would be great. Thank you so much for having me, and good luck, everyone. It was a pleasure to meet you.
Yeah, okay. Goodbye, guys.